Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tarot Today. I'm Delphine and I'm here with.
Adrien, hello Delphine. How are you today?
I am doing really well. I had acupuncture yesterday, so it's like I'm feeling really, really calm, which is really nice.
Oh, amazing. I haven't had acupuncture in years. It's fabulous.
Yeah, it's amazing. Um, but what are we talking about today, Adrian?
Well, actually, I think this is a really on topic. You had acupuncture, and we're going to talk about boards.
Yeah, that's really funny. Okay, yeah, so we're going to talk about the Suit of Swords. So we've gone over the Suit of Wands, we've gone over the Suit of Cups, and the Suit of Swords is the suit of the mind, right? So it governs thought and language, perception, truth, conflict, intellect, and decision making and psychological experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, some people might say, why does it work this way? Because the
Oh,
sword are associated with the element of air, right? And air, it's up there. It's the mind, right? It's
it's the mind. Yeah.
the cups hold water, it's liquid, it's the heart, and the wands are fire, right? Action. So yeah, so the suit of sword, the suit of acupuncture, and the needles, the air, the mind, the decision making. I think you said it very well. The psychological aspects of the self.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, I think especially, I mean, we're going to talk especially about the Smith-Waite tarot, right? This is what we've been doing with these suits. Kind of has sometimes a bit of a bad name, you know. It's kind of the suit of swords is the one that's a little bit sometimes difficult to deal with. But I do encourage people to always see the double side of each card, the positive and the negative aspect of each side, because there is this dual aspect. Please excuse me, I have a terrible cold and I'm trying to.
Oh,
So if I sneeze or blow my
yeah.
nose,
And he's still here with us and he still looks fabulous.
I try. So yeah, so the Suit of Sword has a bit of a bad name sometimes, but you know, it's the way I like to describe it is that with one sword, one clear thought, we cut through things, right? One sword, there's no hesitation. It's very clear, it's straightforward. We cut straight to the point, right? But when there is many, many swords, there's too many thoughts, and we don't know what to think anymore, right? And this is where I think the issues, the problems appear, right? Too many thoughts, too many avenues. We can't decide what is going to be right or wrong, right? And so we don't really know which way to go. So I always think that the least sword we have for the mind, the better it is to make a decision. What do you think, Delphine?
No, I entirely agree with you. I don't think that I could have said it better myself. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that at its highest expression, the Suit of Swords can represent like clarity and intelligence, wisdom, objectivity, discernment, honest communication, and also intellectual mastery, right? But then at its lowest expression, the Suit of Swords can also deal with like anxiety and cruelty and sort of like, mental anguish or overthinking, manipulation, harsh words, also a lot of kind of ego projection, self-sabotage, but also emotional detachment. Um, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all this. I mean, if you look at, we're going to go through the cards, obviously, but if you look at, for example, the Ace of Swords, it's very clear. But then we get to the Eight of Swords, she doesn't know what to do anymore. You know, she's lost in the midst of all these swords. You know, oh my God! Every time I see your deck, I love the pastel. I think I'm going to have to order myself.
Yeah, they're cute, aren't they?
So cute, the pastel deck. Oh, I love this. I love this. It's very cute. So why don't we go through the cards? Why don't we go through the cards? Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I love what you said because it's like, yeah, like the Ace of Swords, we begin with this clear thought. There's this sword, it's extended from spirit, right? Has a crown around it. There's like this idea of clarity. Like, I mean, whenever I see this card, I think of like a bolt of lightning cracking and just sort of illuminating everything.
It's a eureka moment, isn't it? It's like, aha,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
uh-huh.
I know exactly what I need to do. There's no hesitation. There's really this thing of let's get clear, let's get cut to the chase. I know what to do, I know what you think. My idea is very clear. It's right there, right? This is the Ace of Swords. Um, I call it the death of hesitation.
I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. But then
Yeah.
as soon as we step into the Two of Swords, right?
Hmm.
We have a lady sitting there with two swords crossed, right? And she's blindfolded. What always strikes me here is that she's crossing her arms in front of her heart. And I always feel like there's something quite strong and powerful about this idea of crossing the heart. It's like not allowing the heart to speak almost,
Well,
right?
and I love that because it's like also we have the water in the background, right? And oftentimes, like if we actually look to the water and all the tarot cards, that can tell us like what the emotions are doing. So the
Yeah.
emotions here are calm, or there's like a calming aspect. And then I also find it really interesting because her shoes, her shoes are yellow, right? And then also it's like we have this crescent moon that's also yellow. And yellow is often about like intellectualizing our feelings. So it's almost like she's grounded in the intellectualization of her feelings. And then it's also just interesting because we have the moon in the corner, again, a crescent moon. And I always see the moon when it appears in any card, even just as a small symbol, that it's speaking to our awareness of our subconscious, right? So the fact that it's right now a crescent, there's only partial understanding.
Beautiful, absolutely. So partial understanding, and I mean the moon's got something with intuition, right? So could you
Yeah.
say that maybe here we're talking about partial intuition, and
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
the other part needs to be intellectualized for us to make that decision.
yeah, it's almost like, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because like, yes, and a lot of people oftentimes like see this card as like a card of indecision or the card of like stalemate. And I mean, I completely agree, right? Like, I mean, there's just sort of this halting kind of energy when we see this card. Oftentimes when this card appears in a reading, I often think that, okay, the decision hasn't yet been made, or that something is kind of just in stasis for the time being. But it's interesting because it's like that stasis or that like holding period before we make a decision can actually be quite important. I oftentimes like see this crescent moon as just kind of like representing the fact that like awareness is coming into our being or it's coming to light. So it's kind of like instead of seeing this card as like overtly negative or like, that something is like being blocked, I see it as like, okay, the information has just not yet been revealed or something is still being processed.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot disagree with what you're saying. I think it's very intelligent. There is really for me this card really shows the aspect of two possibilities. We can
Yeah,
go into two different situations, and there is a mix of emotion because I see the water and not being so calm at the back. It's slightly it's almost like when it's slightly bubbling when you're boiling water and it's starting to get a bit hot and it's moving, and this is what the water seems to be doing at the back for me. So there is an aspect of emotions pushing you to decide between which direction you're going to go, right? And because she's blindfolded, I feel like, it's about going within and really thinking, and there's a sense of feeling as well here, but it's not about all feeling and all thinking because it's a two, right? So there's a duality. There is a choice to be made, but the choice cannot be made only by thinking or only by feeling. There is a mix of both here for me.
yeah, I love that. So like the practical application of this card, like, this can be, I mean, I don't know who's guilty of not opening a group chat because you don't want confrontation, right? It's like, I mean, me, hand up, right? Two of Swords. Who has been in who stayed in the situationship to avoid heartbreak. um,
Yeah.
you know, who has like pretended that they've been neutral, when in reality you've been internally conflicted, or like, emotional shutdown, after overwhelm.
It's so interesting that you're bringing all these things up for the Two of Swords because well, obviously very different people, right? Um, and I've never really thought about it this way because I'm kind of like, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm opening
Yeah.
the chat and I'm saying, what I really think. I'm like, if I'm not happy in this situation, I'm out of there. For me, I rarely fall into this card because I'm quite decisive.
Hmm.
I think I'm much more of a, oh, what interesting. I'm much more of, I would say, an odd number of the sword. I'm much more of a one and a three, which I think are masculine numbers. And I guess you're much more of a two and a four, maybe.
I am. I definitely say I'm four. Yeah. I'm twos
Yeah,
and fours, definitely.
yeah. Whereas it's interesting, isn't it, how we relate a bit more with certain cards, and our attitude in general is much more associated with certain cards. And I do invite our listeners to think, okay, are you more of a one, a two, a three, or a four in your usual attitude? I have no problem opening a chat, a group chat, or to be able to say what I think, or either it's going to upset or not, because it is what it is. I rarely find myself in the Two of Sword, but that's very
Hmm.
interesting. Oh, you made me think about. I feel a paper coming on. I feel a paper. Yeah, you're right.
Well, yeah, like yeah, and I love that you mentioned that. I love that you mentioned the masculine and feminine, and also like you bring up like a really good point because something else that should invite our listeners to do is as you guys are pulling your cards, just like notice the cards that repeatedly come up for you versus the cards that repeatedly come up for your friend, or the cards that repeatedly come up for you in a work situation versus a love situation, because like you'll begin to kind of see like just your energy reflected back to you in tarot, right? Because yeah, it is fascinating how some people will get certain cards and other people never will.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's move to the Three of Swords. That
Yep.
is a card that scares people. Okay, we have a heart with three swords piercing through.
Such drama.
Very drama. I mean, the swords are very dramatic, right? The swords are extremely dramatic.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the Three of
Take
Swords,
the
like I
hair.
mean,
Take the hair.
with the Three of Swords, like it's traditionally known as the card of like heartbreak and grief, betrayal, like a painful truth, uh, and also like emotional suffering, right? That can't be bypassed. Um, so like I mean, a classic example, somebody figuring out that their partner has been involved with somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. The threes in all suits are the small realization of the suit. Why? The threes is a smaller version of the 10 in all the suits, right? Because if our listeners are familiar with the Tree of Life, the first three Sephiroth creates a triangle, creates the first shape, so the first realization. So there is a heartache, there is a betrayal here that happens. But what I find with this card is that it's the mind over the heart, right? So there is a win, the mind wins over the emotions, the heart. We're able to actually to get to the heart of the matter here. Okay. So I find that this is often a card of betrayal, of sadness, of breakup, and all these things, but also being able to actually have a mind strong enough to say, no, this is what I need to do, no matter how I feel about it. I need to rationalize this, and no matter how difficult this could be, this is what I need to do. This is how I'm overcoming this situation. For me, this is the positive aspect of this card, right? That we don't just follow the emotions, the heart, but we really rationalize things, no matter how difficult things are, so we can overcome this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think this comes a
No,
bit more from my Marseille background, where the
yeah,
really creates, the mind creates something, you know?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's interesting because I think I may have explained this actually in a previous episode, but it's like, the way that I always see the Three of Swords is that it kind of I mean, all threes are triangles. I think that you've said that before. And then also the three of swords. Like, I mean, it kind of like takes us back to like the original triangle, which is usually father, mother, child,
Yeah.
right? And so it's almost like that original triangle kind of like it creates the circuitry in our brain, right? So it's like, I mean, we forge those pathways of just kind of like, maybe that pathway is, well, I suppose the negative pathways could be like abandonment or like, adopting scarcity patterns from like your parents or like, I don't know, I suppose just like being or feeling triangulated in certain situations or like, being the scapegoat or something like that. And then it's almost like that circuitry as we grow older, like, I mean, other people that we run into or situations kind of activate that circuitry and then it causes the same pathway of grief that we end up retracing almost in our mind. So I always like to think of, and I think you've already sort of said this, but I like to think of the three of swords as like grief that we hold in the mind. So you know um and I think a classic example is, maybe when some of us have gone through a breakup, but we've not really grieved the person, but we've just kind of grieved the loss of the relationship for the sake of the relationship, which isn't actually as genuine, I would say. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's so many aspects we can look at this three of swords. The idea of the triangle, the idea of this odd number is very active, right? So, the swords are active, the swords are piercing. With swords we fight, with swords we argue, with swords we have yeah, we have an argument. We have a way of thinking. An argument as in not necessarily fighting, but we defend something, right? And often it's not what we want, it's against what we feel, so it hurts. I mean, this card came up for me. I remember I was about to go through a very difficult breakup, and I could feel it coming, and somebody gave me a reading, and this came up, and this card came up, and I saw it, and I got it, I got it, and I broke down, and the poor reader was like, no, but this might mean something else. I was like, listen, there's no need to sugarcoat things for me, right? This is also what I do for a living. You're very kind to try to sit with me and try to help me through this difficult time, but there's no, don't beat around the bush. This is happening, and I'm gonna have to brace myself. And in the card, we have the rain, and we have the clouds. But then what happens after the rain and the clouds go through? We have the sunshine. Well, unless you live in England, then you have more rain and cloud, but but usually you get a bit of sunshine.
It
Uh,
just, yeah. I love what you mentioned about the breakup because, yeah, the Three of Swords does usually appear during breakups. I know that I'm talking about this card quite a bit, but one story that I just want to share is, when I was younger, when I was first getting into tarot, I think I mean, I got into it when I was 11, but when I started really reading in public spaces and doing tarot all the time, um, I remember one time I walked into this gelato shop and I had started like reading tarot, and the girl behind the counter was a couple of years older than me. And oh my God, she was so gorgeous, like so gorgeous. And actually, this girl was like a model that worked at the gelato shop, which is just so classic. But regardless, she asked me if I would do a reading for her. And I was like, yeah, sure. And I was really nervous because I hadn't done like, readings for other people. But point is that I pulled a Celtic cross and the first sword that I pulled, or sorry, the first card that I pulled was the Three of Swords. And I asked her, I was like, are you going through a breakup? And she gasped and she was like, yes, I am. And then she decided I was really quite psychic and then actually ended up being like one of my regular clients. Um, but yeah, like, I mean, the Three of Swords usually does indicate breakups and sometimes even like a third party entering a relationship. But also with that third party entering a relationship, it's really important to keep in mind like that third party could be not just another man or another woman. It could also just be a mother in law, a father in law, a boss, a
mhm.
child, right? So,
I'd like to rewind for a second to the fact
yep.
you were very nervous to read for her. And then the first card that came up was the Three of Swords. And you asked her, are you going through a breakup? And she said, yes. And this confirmation might have dispelled any nervousness that you might have in your tummy, in your emotions. So here, the Three of Swords gave you the information you needed for the client, but also gave you, Delphine, the power to have your mind overcoming the nervousness of the heart that you had. So
Absolutely.
this card gave you, so this is the double aspect of this card, right? Showed us the breakup, but gave you the positive aspect, which was the realization of the mind, the creation, the strength of the mind to overcome the nervousness of the heart.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. And actually, that's very true. And I learned something key in that moment just about reading tarot for other people, which is when you see something in the cards, always frame something as a question. Because if you just go ahead and go straight into the interpretation, what can end up happening is that the way that you explain it may not be the way that it can be received by your client. So even if all of the information is sitting there in front of you, you can end up, I don't want to say getting it wrong, but just not presenting the information in a way that actually clicks for the person that you're reading for. And this is also like, I think one of the key elements of reading for others, right? It's like, it's understanding what information you're getting, how to tactfully present it to somebody else, and also package it in a way that's easy for them to digest.
Yeah. I never read without a question. Never. And I
Yeah.
always teach to um, formulate questions probably. And this could be an episode we do about
Y- yes, yes, we do need to talk
very,
about that one because
very,
I feel like nobody really quite knows how to ask the tarot questions.
oh my God, it's half of the reading.
It's half of the reading.
Half of the reading. If you know how to ask a question properly, then you know which direction you go. You know what path you're walking down, right? It's so important to know how to ask those questions because the cards can give you so many different aspects. And if you try, unless you're a brilliant medium or psychic, which I don't think I am, and I will never pretend to be. I need to have a clear question so I can walk down this path with the client very precisely. The sharper the question, the sharper the answer. The question is half of the reading for me. It's so important, so important. You have to
Yeah,
anchor it, you have to ground it. Yeah.
absolutely agree. Absolutely agree.
So
Um,
the Four of Swords. After the drama, we chill, right? After the drama of the Three of Swords, we have the Four, which we relax. There is a chap, a king, a knight, we're not quite sure, lying down, probably dead. There's a tomb. And the three swords above him are not intertwined in the heart anymore. They are now separated. So there is really a calm. The number fours are about stability, right? Four is a square we can lean on. We can lean on a thought here. We can lean on a thought that we know, right? It's something of maybe of the past, something that we're able to relax about. Yeah.
yeah, no, absolutely. The Four of Swords is about retreat and recovery, recalibration, um, contemplation, and like basically like a nervous system reset. I mean, honestly, it's funny because when you and I first got on Zoom and like we were saying hi to each other before we actually began recording, it's like I was just talking about how I'm like taking a couple of days of annual leave and I haven't had annual leave in so long. And and like now that I can actually rest, my body is just like I'm dead. Like I feel like I'm going through adrenal fatigue. It's like I could barely get out of bed this morning. And I mean, that's not a bad sign. It just means my body's resting and I'll be fine in a couple days. But that's the Four of Swords.
It is
It's
absolutely.
it's like I'm minimizing socializing. I just want to be in bed with a cup of tea, reading a book. And I just want to take like 3 hot showers a day. That's it.
Sounds dreadful. Ah, no, it's fantastic. Of course, it sounds amazing. Cup of tea, and I'm also I think I need a bit of Four of Sword with me at the moment. I'm just, I haven't had proper holidays in a
And
while.
that's sorry to cut you off, but that's also interesting, right? It's that the Four of Swords can also sometimes be the card of illness.
Tell me more.
Well, it's like the Five of Pentacles and then also like the Four of Swords. Like whenever I get those two cards together, I'm like, somebody's at home with a cold, or somebody has the flu, or something like that. Just because like the Four of Swords is that like it's that retreat, it's that solitude that like we kind of need sometimes when we're sick, right? Um,
Yeah. Oh, it's a card of solitude.
Yeah, so,
Not
you
in a
know,
way, because
out,
if you have no thoughts and no ideas coming your way, therefore it is a card of solitude. It's a card of retreat. It's a card of you doing nothing. It's a card of I guess it could be a card of sickness. I guess,
yeah,
paired with the Five of Pentacles, I can totally see that.
yeah, or like a Vipassana retreat, right? So silent retreat,
Yeah.
um, digital detox, card of therapy, potentially, um, taking a social media break, rest after illness, a sabbatical, right? Um, choosing silence instead of reacting. Um, whatever it is, it's like on the Four of Swords, like we're choosing peace. We're choosing peace. It's really funny because one time I dated this guy and he was such an overthinker. Oh my God, overthought everything, went around in circles, just circles. And he never knew that I knew that he was doing this, but I knew that he was doing this. And it was always funny because whenever I pulled cards for him, um, sometimes I would get the Four of Swords. And whenever I pulled the Four of Swords for him, all of a sudden it's like that's when we that's when we would see each other, things would flow. And it's like and it's almost like he would give himself like a rest from that overthinking and he would just kind of let the relationship flow. So, it can also represent rest from that kind of like mental anguish as well.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. Hmm.
Also, remote working. Sometimes, like I see this card come up. Like I know that, like whenever people are asking me career questions, and if I pull like the Hermit and the Four of Swords, I'm like, oh, you do remote work.
Interesting. Yeah, of course, it makes complete sense. It makes complete sense. Yeah. Wow. Thanks for that. Lots of food for thoughts. What about the Five of Swords?
Oh my God, the Five of Swords.
That's a tricky one to teach, I
Yeah,
find.
this one's hard.
Nobody likes it, and I mean, it's called defeat, right? The fives are difficult numbers in the suit of sword, which is also difficult. Now, usually people that learn this, that are learning tarot, find it difficult to understand who he's what in this card, because the chap at the front looks like he's defeated the other people, right? But then people are asking me, well, but that means I'm defeating them, right? Um, but Rachel, I think it's Rachel Pollack in her book. She says that you never go against that card. You just have to accept it. You just have to accept the defeat, and that don't fight it. Just accept it, because even if there is a sense of winning, nobody's a winner, because the win there um, is an actual defeat, because it
Mhm.
costs you too much, right?
Yeah, yeah. So let's think of it in like, let's say that there's two people and they own a company, or not own a company, but maybe one of them has founded the company, and then the other person works for the company, but is also quite senior there. And then let's say that the founder promises, the person that's a little bit more junior, okay, you know, um, let's say, oh, I'll make you a partner in the business, right?
Mhm.
And then let's say that that doesn't end up happening, right? It's like, then okay, yeah, like maybe the founder feels like he's kind of like won something in the end, but in reality, it's like, I mean, the trust has been so deeply damaged there that it's like it's a hollow victory. It's like nobody actually wins in that situation.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the key aspect of the Five of Swords is, yeah, you got to lean into the defeat because either way, nobody wins. And actually, like I mean, I have a legal background, and in law during negotiation, they always say that it's not about getting it. It's not about getting everything that you want when you walk into a legal negotiation. It's about making sure that it's like both parties kind of give a little, right? And that's how you win.
Mhm.
And in the Five of Swords, there's no negotiation. It's my way or the highway, but that's alienating.
It's alienating. Oh, I love this. I love this, because we are beings. We are as people. We are social creatures, and we need the connection. And when we
Yeah.
are alienated, no matter if we are an introvert or not, we are separated from the group, and therefore, this is in back then, when we didn't have the society that we live in. If you would be alienated, you would die. If you were alone, you would die. You couldn't survive in the world. So I love this idea that if it's my way or the highway, and you win at all cost, there is alienation. Therefore, there is a loss of connection. And we can see it in the card. We have one person looking at the two other people, which we can see their back. So there's a sense of, disconnection, you know. Absolutely, absolutely disconnection. Interesting.
Yeah. So practical application, this is like winning an argument but losing the relationship. This is passive aggressive texting. This is can be online arguments or like gossip. Gossip can also be another interpretation of this.
Hmm.
Intellectual arrogance, and also yeah, sometimes like using vulnerability as ammunition.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. And then the Six of Swords. The Six of Swords. I love this card. I love this card because this card for me has a real uh double edge, right? It's a yes and it's a no. As in like we're going away from troubled times into we're going away from rough waters to smooth waters. And what does that mean? That means that we're going to calmer times, we're going away from something difficult. But what does that mean? We have to usually understand the situation we're currently in, to see where we're going from A to B, right? Because we have somebody in the boat traveling from one side to the other with the swords planted in the boat. And I feel like the swords represents the heartache, the difficult times that we've gone through. But these difficult times, we take them with us. We learn from them so we can take them as experience to go into the next area of our life. Because if we pull the swords out of the boat is going to sink, right? So we have to travel with these swords
Ah, I
on.
never knew that. I
No.
never knew that. I never knew that the swords needed to be stuck into the boat like that because you're right. Then there would be holes in the boat and it would sink. I always wondered. Adrian. Okay, sorry, go on.
And I love that. It's the difficulties of your experiences which allows you to survive your next experience. You
Yeah,
can't leave that behind. You have to take that with you. So you're better armed for the future. Otherwise, you're gonna sink. No?
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Um, yeah, so I mean, you've already said it, but yeah, the Six of Swords, it's a card of transition, it's a card of moving on. It's about moving away from difficulty into calmer waters, as you've already said, also about gradual healing. Um, you know, so also, honestly, the way that I usually see this card show up practically as well is like physical moves or like crossing over a channel of water or something.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it can also represent like moving house after divorce or leaving a toxic workplace, um, emotional recovery, migration, um, and again, kind of as I've already said, long distance travel for peace or safety, and then also just kind of like slowly rebuilding, right? Because just we're rebuilding after that intense conflict in the five. Um, and I feel like this is a card that doesn't necessarily promise instant happiness, but it promises kind of movement in the right direction, right?
Yeah, in a direction, in improved direction, whatever that,
Yeah.
and I think I was teaching last night a Celtic cross, and this was the outcome, right? The outcome of a relationship. Now, then people were telling me, "But are they staying together or are they not?" And I was saying, well, we're not quite sure because it depends on if the person follows the advice. If the person follows the advice on, being a bit more vulnerable and trying to figure things out with their partner, they could be moving from rough waters to better waters, right? But also, if the person doesn't listen to the advice, the other person is moving from a not happy relationship towards a happier place. So I think that the transition is almost like you get to choose what kind of transition you find yourself in, what kind of work you decide to put in, I find. For me, this is not a positive or a negative card. It just deepens the work you put into the transition because the swords are there. you know, and you have to be aware of the swords. You have to learn from the swords. No?
No, absolutely. I entirely agree with you.
Hmm. What about the Seven of Swords? A confusing
Oh,
card here again, for people.
oh my God. Yeah, nobody knows how to get this card right. It's like, I mean, everybody goes online and then figures out that it's the card of lying. And then whenever they pull it, they're like, I'm being lied to. Um, oh my God. Sorry, I just think it's really funny. This is usually a card that I think people get very up in arms about. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's, there's a couple of modern decks which have we designed this card with a fox in it. And I think this is a very accurate way to see this card because this is the cunning card, right? This is the how do we how do we get what we want? How do we strategize? How do we become cunning? How do we so there's not it's a plan which could be better thought of, which is not completely, which is not a perfect plan, right? And there's something quite cunning about it, right? Now, it's not necessarily lies, but it's not necessarily honesty either, you know?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, the Seven of Swords is about secrecy and strategy. It can be the card of like deception. It can be the card of avoidance. Um, just kind of like acting independently outside of the rules, whatever that means. Like, I mean, sometimes that can be, something negative, and sometimes that's just, sometimes that can just look like an employee secretly interviewing for another position while like remaining loyal to their current company or something, right? The Seven of Swords could be, somebody being avoidant in a relationship around like potentially discussing certain issues. Um, yeah, I mean, this could look like somebody maintaining a story to save face rather than actually telling the truth.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it can be sneaking around. It can point toward cheating, but like we can't go there just on its own. At least I don't think that we can.
Yeah.
It can be the card of withholding information. Um,
One
it can
card
also
is never enough. Just
never
one
enough.
card is never enough to tell to somebody, oh, this person is cheating, or this person. You always need to find on the table at least a repeat of what you think is happening, right? You need to have, it's a little bit like when you read a natal chart, you want to find a repeat of a pattern, right, in a natal chart. It's the same thing with the tarot. You can't just have one card and say, oh, this person is cheating, this person is, you just need you need a bit more, right? Because, well, it can be quite damaging.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just like, I mean, I remember one time, I had this girl and she was very, very, very quiet and she came in for a reading and she didn't really give me a lot of feedback. And that's fine. Well, I mean, I like all kinds of readings, but yeah, she wasn't giving me a lot of feedback, but it was just really interesting because in the center of the reading, I had the devil, like, beneath her I had justice and crossing her I had the Seven of Swords. And I was like, has somebody been really dishonest with you or do you feel that you've been cheated on? And she was like, yeah, I recently found out that my partner cheated on me.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like, I mean, devil, it's kind of like, that animalistic instinct or that vice kind of coming up, right? And then Seven of Swords, like, I mean, crossing somebody, it's like they're thinking about the concealment. And then like beneath them is just like this idea of like, well, I need accountability, you
Yeah.
know, I
Yeah.
need transparency, I need honesty. Like, I mean, this wasn't right. So yeah, like, I mean, those are kind of like the cards that you would want to look for, I think, or some of them.
Well, in that case, you have
Um,
three cards telling you something, and that is enough to, to come up with this sort of suggestion.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, I think the key takeaway with the Seven of Swords is that this card is not always malicious. And sometimes it's just a survival strategy. Or also in career readings, business strategy can be really important,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, I think that it also shows up in that way. But again, like, I mean, as Adrian initially mentioned, it's like, some modern decks using the fox, cunning,
Yeah.
cunning, and cunning is neutral. And I would say that if we're going to give this like a neutral keyword, it's cunning.
Cunning, absolutely. And the advice of this card is strategize well without showing what you are trying to achieve first. This is the advice.
Yeah.
Strategize for yourself because, you have to think of yourself in the situation first. This would be the advice. Absolutely. The Eight
Yeah.
of Swords. Now, this is, we are arriving in the really dramatic cards here. The Eight of Swords. The woman is tied up among swords. She seems to not be able to move. She's blindfolded. Where do we go from there? There's a sense of shame. There's a sense of being tied up, being imprisoned, not being able to act, not being able to do anything. But then the real question here is, I mean, I guess me being a coach, I always try to put the person in the center of the action, right? So, who has done this? Have you done this to yourself? Or has somebody made you feel that way? If somebody has made you feel that way, what can you do to free yourself up of this situation, right? I always try, this is always my approach, how can we reframe this for you to get the hell out of the situation, right? What do you think, Delphine?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the card of like mental imprisonment, right? And self-limitation and fear and just believing that you're trapped. And it's like the thing is that one thing that I always like to remind people about the suit of swords is that the mind is really powerful. So the suit is very, very powerful. Because I mean, I guess it's the whole idea of mentalism, right? It's like, I mean, we need to think something before it actually comes into being. Um,
You need to imagine it. You need to see it in your mind
yeah,
before it can happen. What
e-
am I going to cook tonight? I'm going to make a plate of pasta. If you don't think about the plate of pasta, how is it going to come into being, right? It's not like the plate of pasta is not going to happen and then you're going to think about it. No, no, no. It's all about you think about something, you imagine it, and then it happens, right? And so the Eight of Sword is that you imagine that you can't do anything, therefore you can't do anything.
yeah, it's like initially when I was 18, I didn't realize that I was intelligent. And so I was like, oh, I'm just gonna go to beauty school. And then I went to beauty school and I was like, oh my God, what's going on here, right? Because it's like the kinds of conversations I was having. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do this with my life. And then I finally had this idea of like, oh, I'll get a degree and I'll go to law school. And then somehow I ended up here, right? But I had to think it first. But initially, it was this example of these self-limiting beliefs of like, really putting myself in that position of being like, I can't do anything else. I'm not worth anything else.
Mhm.
And not to say that beauty professionals are not intelligent. That's not what I'm trying to say. But for me, that is like what my experience was, and it wasn't intellectually fulfilling enough for me.
Yeah, because you needed something else. It's not
Yeah,
it's we all wired a certain way, and you realize that this was not the way you were wired, and you believe this was right for you. But then when you find yourself in the situation, you're like, oh, hold on, this is not quite right. Um,
mm-mm.
but it's
Oh,
self-limiting belief, absolutely self-limiting.
yeah. So this is also like, I mean, we've definitely seen this card before where it's like, someone stays in a miserable relationship because, they believe that nobody else would ever love them. So it's like, that woman or that person rather, that just kind of stays in a relationship because they think that like, this is all there is. I can't do better. Or like, I'm just meant to be in this relationship. Um, it's really interesting because I remember one time I read for this woman, and I think it was the most difficult reading that I ever had, not in terms of substance, but just in terms of what I felt like I was working up against. So this card appeared in the position in a Celtic cross of what was beneath her, right? So this is what was anchoring her in the reading. And the second that I saw this, I was like, oh my God, this person has no depth perception. And anything that I'm about to tell them about their situation, they're not actually going to be able to absorb because they're so stuck in their circle of swords
Yeah,
that they're not going to be able to absorb sort of a different perspective or like a different narrative.
yeah. How
And that
did
was exactly what happened.
did you find a way to help her break out of this?
Well, it's interesting because it's like, she was just in a relationship where, you know, it's like, I mean, she just did everything that her husband wanted. And like, she was just kind of a very traditional housewife. And she had just really sort of like adopted that narrative of like, that was just kind of her role in life. And it's not necessarily that that role was bad, or that that role was causing her anguish, but that role was trapping her within a certain container that she wouldn't go beyond, right? So it's kind of like when we're thinking about self-actualization, when we're thinking about what we're put into this world to do, when we're thinking about like, kind of like self-belief or yeah, like I mean, just even like maybe our own goals or desires or whatever. It's like, I mean, when the Eight of Swords appears, like, I mean, we can't necessarily always entertain what we want because it's like somebody else has told us what we're meant to be doing. And then we just adopt that as, gospel or the truth. And then we just kind of can't break free. It's like creating a ceiling for yourself, but it's a glass ceiling.
Yeah, I see. I see. So then, yeah, absolutely. It's finding with the Eight of Sword, is finding what it is that is the blindfold on the eyes, right? What is the blindfold? And trying to somehow slowly remove it so people can get to see the light and the reality around them, right? And it's a very tricky card, which takes us into the Nine of Swords, because with the Eight of Swords, we have the self-limiting beliefs. Stepping into the Knight of Swords, the anxiety that keeps us awake at night. And I really emphasize here that this is the nines are what we do either alone or to ourselves. The tens are what is done to us or what we do for others, right? This is, because if you think about nine is the hermit, is a loner, so it's a lonely card. It's for the self, and the tens of the wheel of fortune is going beyond, right? Is expanding, right? So the nine of sword is really about what keeps us at night and what makes us wake up with nightmares. But the reality is just a continuation of the Eight of Sword, is that it's our self-limiting beliefs, believing that we are in trouble, that there's something wrong, that doesn't allow us to sleep soundly. Therefore, how do we change this? How do we move away from that? What do you think?
No, I absolutely agree with you. It's like, I mean, I love what you said about the fact that, like nine relates to the hermit, because I always talk about this in all of my courses, which is just that nines are individual cards. They're an experience that we have on our own, right? And then, of course, as you say, it's like, going into the tens, then like, we start going back into relationship with other people and things like that. But with the nine of swords, it's like when we have anxiety about something, that anxiety is our own. It's not necessarily something that someone else is experiencing. So, I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's just the card of anxiety, right? So, panic attacks, shame spirals, nightmares, fear of consequences, anticipating anxiety before like a major event or something like that. Um, I always think it's funny when this card appears with the moon, right? Because it like whenever it appears with the moon, I'm always like, oh my God, you're having terrible dreams and like nightmares and like, and you're just kind of in your little box just having your little anxiety attack. um Not that that's funny, we all have anxiety attacks. I think it's just a part of the human experience, but regardless, whenever I pull the nine of swords, to me it's like I look at this card and I'm like, okay, and I honestly just set it aside to the side in a reading. And it's not that I don't go over it, but it's like all this card tells me is, oh, somebody's anxious, okay, and then I'll be like, okay, what are you anxious about? Let's talk about that. Like, and then obviously when we do predictive readings, sometimes the nine of swords will like appear in the outcome position, and whenever that happens I just put a card on top of it, just because it's like your outcome isn't just anxiety, it will be anxiety and right. And like in many of us, I think what we need to understand about this card is that we can have anxiety and we can still be crazy successful. We can have anxiety and the relationship can still work out. We can have anxiety about the job interview and still nail it, so I think that whenever the nine of swords shows up, it's just your anxiety, it's just a mental process, because everything happening in the suit of swords is a mental process. It's not necessarily something that's tangibly happening, right?
Yeah.
It's in our mind.
Yeah, and then the question comes up, is this really what you want? Because
Yeah.
the nine of sword comes up, it's like, well, do you really want that? Is this what, you're aiming for in your life? Because if this is the result of it, this is how you're going to feel. Do you want to stay in the situation? There's, these are questions, which have to be raised. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Oh, where is it?
Oh, another dramatic card. A man lies down, well, a person, I don't know if it's a man, and he's got 10 swords on his spine. Very dramatic here again. The end.
Sefin.
C'est fini. Allez. Scene. Um, yeah, I mean, the tens, they're the ends. One's the beginning, 10 is the end, Um, and I think this is the acceptance of the end of something. We can also talk about betrayal here because the 10 swords are at the back. You know, when I many years ago, when I started reading with the Smith weight, because my tradition is the Marseille, and I've read with the Marseille since I was a teenager. But when I started reading with the Smith weight, and I read for somebody close to me, and I'm not going to reveal who. And this came, and I had a series of cards that came up, and I was not equipped yet to really understand what they meant. But this came to me as a prediction of death. Literally, it did come up to me, and I only saw it once it happened. I was like, oh, damn, that was. I didn't see, I didn't interpret it right at the time because I was very green with this deck. But there was a series of cards that came up, and of course you don't think about something so dark, but it did. Yes, it did come up like this. But again, just the card itself is not enough, right? You need to have
Yeah,
cards around it.
yeah.
You have the questions that anchor it. So don't go around predicting that the Ten of Sword is that, because that's not true. You need to have
Mm-mm.
more than just one card to say this. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And actually, can I just tell two stories, two very quick stories, because I just kind of want to show just the two different aspects of the Ten of Swords, because it's really interesting. Because recently I did a reading for a client, and she's a regular client. I usually only ever read for her relationship, only because she's very together in every other aspect of her life. She only comes and sees me maybe about every 8 months or something. But regardless, she asked me, she was like, "Can we just do a general reading, and can you just see what comes up?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." In the past, in the culture cross-eyed death. Um, and the entire reading just seemed like there was just a lot of anguish going on. And then I was like, okay, tell me what this death is talking about. And I pulled the King of Pentacles, and I was like, okay, this is associated with a person. And I just got the sense that it felt like a father figure. And then I pulled the Ten of Swords to clarify that further. And then I asked her, I was like, so are you going through a bereavement? And she said, yes, yes, my dad just died a couple of months ago. And I was like, okay. And so again, it's like, I mean, and then I was talking to another extremely talented tarot reader. And I was like, what cards would you look for physical death? And she was like, well, at a bare minimum, death and the Ten of Swords. And right, and that was the exact combination that I got with a person, right? The King of Pentacles showed up as a person. So, and also sometimes the Four of Swords and also like the Tower, like, I mean, kind of like those together as well. Or like sometimes even the Star. Sometimes even the star of just kind of like going up to the heavens is kind of like the way that I will interpret it.
The letting
Um,
go aspect, with the star.
yeah, yeah, or kind of going into ether, right? Um, but then it was interesting because just I think it was last night I was teaching a course as well. I guess we both teach on Tuesdays. And I was teaching a course, and it was just really interesting because I was having the entire room. People were just doing 3 card readings for their partner sitting across the table. And it was really interesting because a guy had asked the girl sitting across from him, okay, how is my job going to go? Um, and like I just started like a new role. And he got the Nine of Swords, the Ten of Swords, and then he got the High Priestess. Um, I always think it's so funny how I can just remember card combinations, but it's like the only thing that I remember with intense detail. But regardless, so the Nine of Swords, the Ten of Swords, and then the High Priestess, right? So in terms of how somebody is going to feel in their new role, the girl sitting across from him interpreted it as, oh, you're really anxious. It's going to suck. Don't know what the high priestess means, but like, maybe like a secret will be revealed. And then I was like, no, well, actually, like the way that we would interpret that is the anxiety, right? The anxiety bubbling up. So previously, before he was in that role, the past of the situation was that he was feeling extremely anxious. But then he got the new job, Sefin, to the Nine of Swords. It ends. Like, I mean, the Ten of Swords is also the ending of a thought pattern, right? And it can be a very brutal ending, or it can be like a painful ending, but sometimes it just means the ending to a very difficult period, right? And then the high priestess, okay, then we're finally connected to our inner voice again, and we can actually trust our intuition, which is not happening in the Nine of Swords because we are so anxious and ungrounded. And then I asked him, is that accurate? And he said, yes, absolutely. You know? And so it's like, I mean, I think that those are just two ways that the Ten of Swords can appear, where it's saying two very different things. So yes, it can be a card of catastrophe, but also kind of look at the way that the cards are appearing, right? Because
Yeah.
if the Ten of Swords is coming after lots of negative cards,
Mhm.
then there's a good chance that it's saying that there's an end to that difficult period.
Well, I think it's important to remember that the Ten of Swords talks about the end, right? The end of something. And the end of something is not necessarily a death, right? It could be the end of anxiety. It could be the end of work. It could be the end of a relationship. It could be the end of a disease, the end of discomfort. And there's an acceptance. Why? Because also at the very far end of the card, we can see that there is a bright sky, right? There isn't, it's not just dark. There is somehow past the black clouds, there is some a brightness, right? And so the Ten of Swords is the end. And if it comes up as an advice, embrace and accept the end of it. You have to embrace the fact that you need to get over it. You need to move on and accept that this is it. There's no more to be done. Like that's it.
Yeah. And one thing that I love with this card, and I just one more thing I want to say about the Ten of Swords, is this is the ego's final letting go of something to which it has been attached. The ego's final letting go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because if in the nine, the ego is so wrapped up into the anxiety, and finally the ego lets go in the 10. Absolutely.
Yeah. And
And I
now, Adrian, Sefin.
C'est fin. Well, this was a sort of sword, difficult suit, but remember, it's necessary. The four suits are necessary for this human experience. The four elements. This is how we see the universe coming together. These four elements within Western philosophy, Western esoteric philosophy. Great.
Yeah.
Well, we wish you a beautiful day, and hopefully we'll see you for our next episode, which will be the Pentacles. We'll talk about the
Hmm.
Pentacles in our next episode.
Next Wednesday. Next Wednesday. We'll see you then.
See you then. Bye, Delphine.
Bye.